Have you ever wondered how an army 3 times larger, better equipped, and utterly confident of victory could end in catastrophic defeat? History is full of battles that seemed decided before a single blow was struck, moments when every advantage tilted to one side and victory appeared to be only a matter of time. And yet, time and again, history took an unexpected turn. The tide shifted not because of some secret strategy or a grave mistake by a general, but because of a small, overlooked detail. It was something you would never find on a map or in a battle plan, something that quietly existed right beneath the soldiers' feet. And it was this seemingly harmless detail that turned a guaranteed win into a legendary failure, forcing us to ask a deeper question. What truly decides victory and defeat in war? In October of the year 1415, Europe was in the midst of one of the longest and most brutal conflicts of the medieval era, the Hundred Years' War between England and France. This was not merely a struggle over territory, it was a fight for power, honor, and the very right to the throne between two great dynasties of Western Europe. At that moment, England was facing serious financial strain and internal instability, yet it was led by a young king of remarkable ambition and resolve, Henry V. Henry V ascended the throne at a relatively young age, but he quickly proved that he was no ceremonial monarch confined to courtly rituals. He was driven by a powerful desire to restore England's prestige on the European continent, especially in France, a land English kings had long regarded as their rightful inheritance. With that goal in mind, Henry led an army of roughly 6,000 men deep into French territory. His force consisted mainly of infantry, most notably English longbowmen, wielding a weapon that had already struck fear into French knights in earlier battles. Even so, by the standards of major campaigns, Henry's army was widely considered small and insufficient. On the opposing side, the Kingdom of France held what seemed like an overwhelming advantage. The French could muster between 20 and 30,000 troops, including an elite class of noble knights, the very embodiment of the nation's military strength and honor. These knights were clad in heavy armor, armed with the finest weapons of their age, and mounted on war horses trained to charge relentlessly across the battlefield. Beyond sheer numbers, France also enjoyed superior logistics, abundant resources, and complete familiarity with the terrain. The fateful confrontation took place near the village of Agincourt in northern France. This was land the French knew intimately, every road, every field, every possible route of advance. Fighting on home soil gave them a clear psychological edge. Many French chroniclers of the time believed victory was only a matter of time. Among the French nobility, some were already discussing who might be the one to capture the English king and demand the highest ransom, since taking an enemy king alive was considered a prize far more valuable than killing him outright. The situation of the English army could not have been more different. They had endured exhausting marches under harsh conditions. Supplies were running dangerously low, many soldiers were suffering from dysentery, and exhaustion was widespread. Retreat was no longer a safe option. Any withdrawal risked pursuit and total annihilation. Ahead of them stood a French force several times their size. Behind them lay only a narrow path to survival. Henry V and his men were left with a stark choice: fight against overwhelming odds or be crushed without mercy. By conventional logic, the outcome seemed inevitable. Every statistic, every comparison, every rational calculation favored France. But history rarely obeys cold arithmetic. It does not move according to simple tables and numbers. Instead, it is shaped by small variables, details so easily overlooked that they seem insignificant. Yet when combined, they can bring down even the most flawless plan. And at Agincourt, It was precisely these ignored variables that quietly aligned, ready to produce one of the most astonishing reversals in the history of European warfare. On the night before the battle, a heavy rain poured down over the narrow plain between two forests near the village of Agincourt. For most of the French army, this seemed like a trivial detail. In medieval military thinking, rain was merely a secondary factor, hardly something that could alter the outcome of a battle they believed was already won. With an army several times larger than their enemy, made up of the finest knights in Europe, they were confident that even wet ground would not stop their overwhelming force from crushing the English in a single charge. But that rain quietly transformed the battlefield. The field where the two armies faced each other was farmland, freshly ploughed after the harvest. After a night of relentless rain, the soft earth turned into a vast stretch of thick, sticky mud, slick, heavy, and treacherous. The danger was that this change was not obvious from a distance. Only when thousands of feet and hooves moved across it at the same time did its true impact reveal itself. The next morning, true to the chivalric spirit of the age, the French launched the attack. Thousands of knights in heavy steel armor, mounted on war horses, surged forward, expecting to shatter the English line with one decisive assault. But almost immediately, their formation began to slow. A French knight's armor could weigh 30 to 40 kilograms, not counting weapons and shields. As the horses plunged into the deep mud, they started to slip, sink, and lose balance. The momentum of the charge, the lifeblood of cavalry, was completely destroyed. Many knights were thrown from their horses. Under normal conditions, getting back up would not have been difficult. But in thick mud, weighed down by heavy armor, it became nearly impossible. Every movement drained enormous amounts of energy, while the mud clung to their limbs, dragging them downward. Those behind them, unable to see what was happening ahead, kept pressing forward, and the narrow space between the forests quickly became jammed with men and horses. The English, meanwhile, held a far more favorable position. They were mostly infantry and archers, lightly equipped and far less affected by the mud. English longbowmen had planted sharpened wooden stakes in front of their lines, keeping a safe distance while unleashing relentless volleys of arrows. These arrows did not need to pierce solid steel armor. Hitting the horses, striking gaps in armor, or simply spreading panic was enough. Wounded horses reared, turned back, and trampled one another, plunging the French ranks into even greater chaos. Once a knight fell into the mud, he became a living obstacle. Those behind him stumbled and fell on top of one another, forming tangled heaps of bodies and horses. Many knights did not die from wounds at all, but from exhaustion or suffocation, faces pressed into the mud, unable to free themselves. The very numbers that should have guaranteed victory now accelerated the disaster. In just a few hours at the Battle of Agincourt, an army considered among the most elite in Europe was utterly broken. France lost thousands of noble knights, the core of its military and political leadership. The English, despite being vastly outnumbered, suffered relatively light losses, believed to be fewer than 1,000 men. The balance of the Hundred Years' War shifted in a way no one had anticipated, and none of it began with a secret strategy or a revolutionary weapon. It began with something far smaller, so small it was ignored entirely. A layer of mud formed after a single night of rain. The Battle of Agincourt left behind an extraordinarily costly lesson for history, not only about war, but about how humans understand power and certainty. It shows that victory and defeat are not decided simply by superior numbers or more advanced weapons. The French army lacked neither soldiers, nor equipment, nor experienced, well-trained knights hardened by years of warfare. And yet, All of those advantages became meaningless the moment they dismissed what seemed like insignificant details. France's defeat did not come from weakness, but from overconfidence. They believed their overwhelming superiority allowed them to ignore secondary factors. A night of rain was considered trivial. A muddy field was treated as a minor inconvenience. A direct frontal assault, rather than patience or tactical adjustment, was made with the mindset of inevitable victory. But these choices compounded one another, turning advantages into burdens and raw strength into a fatal vulnerability. History, then, is not written solely by kings and famous generals. It is also shaped by weather, terrain, and ordinary factors that humans too often overlook. A small environmental change can unravel a plan meticulously prepared over months or even years. Agincourt reminds us that in war, the side that adapts to circumstances is often far more dangerous than the one that relies purely on brute force. Looked at more broadly, this lesson extends far beyond the battlefield. In modern life, many great failures also begin with small, neglected details. A decision that seems unimportant, a warning sign ignored, or an environmental factor left unconsidered can quietly accumulate and lead to serious consequences. Success often collapses not because of a single direct blow, but because of subtle mistakes allowed to persist over time. Agincourt reminds us that what causes people to stumble is not always the towering wall in front of them, but sometimes a small pebble beneath their feet. And it is the ability to notice, respect, and prepare for those pebbles that ultimately determines who remains standing while walking the unpredictable paths of history and of life itself.